Let me tell you something that sounds completely backwards. Being poor costs more money than being rich. Not a little more. A lot more. And I don't mean that in some abstract philosophical way. I mean in actual dollars. Real money. Every single month. The person with $500 in their bank account pays more for the same car than the person with $50,000 in their bank account. The person living paycheck to paycheck pays higher interest rates than the person who never needs to borrow. The person who can't afford the better option almost always ends up paying more for the worse one. And the wild part? Rich people figured this out a long time ago. It's one of the reasons they stay rich. And it's one of the reasons that getting out of financial struggle is so much harder than anyone ever tells you. Because the system isn't just neutral. It doesn't just leave poor people behind. It actively charges them more to be there. Think about the last time you were short on money. Really short. Maybe it was a bad month. Maybe it was a bad year. Maybe it's right now. Did you ever notice that everything seemed to cost more when you had less? That the options available to you were always the more expensive ones in the long run? That every time you tried to catch up, something else pulled you back? That wasn't bad luck. That wasn't poor decision making. That was the poverty premium. And by the end of this video you are going to understand exactly how it works, why it exists, and what you can actually do about it starting today. Stay with me. Because this one is going to change how you see money completely. There is a concept in economics called the poverty premium. It basically means that low-income people pay significantly more for the same goods and services than wealthy people do. Not because they spend more. Not because they're less careful. But because the financial system is structured in a way that makes everything more expensive when you have less. Let me give you the most basic example first. A bottle of laundry detergent. The large family size costs roughly 3 times more upfront than the small size. If you have $50 in your account, and rent is due in 3 days, you buy the small bottle. You have no choice. But that small bottle washes maybe 20 loads. The large bottle washes 80 loads. So per load, the small bottle costs more than the large bottle. Every single time. The person with less money paid more per load. Not because they chose to. Because they had to. Now multiply that across every single purchase you make in a month. Groceries. Cleaning supplies. Toiletries. Clothing. Everything. The person with less money is paying a hidden premium on almost everything they buy simply because they cannot afford to buy in bulk, or buy the more efficient option up front. That is the poverty premium in its most basic form. And it gets much more serious than laundry detergent. Here is one that hits differently when you really look at the numbers. 2 people need a car to get to work. Person A has $8,000 saved. They buy a reliable used car outright. No monthly payment. No interest. Just the car. Insurance is lower because the car is older and paid off. Maintenance costs are predictable. Total cost of that car over 5 years including insurance and basic maintenance is around $14,000. Person B has $500 saved. They cannot buy a car outright. So they go to a dealership and finance a car. Not a great car. Just whatever they can get approved for with their credit score. They get approved for a $15,000 car at somewhere between 15% and 20% interest because their credit score is low because they've had financial struggles in the past. Monthly payment is around $380. Over 5 years they pay back significantly more than $15,000 just in principal and interest. Add insurance which is higher because the car is financed and requires full coverage. Add the fact that this car is newer and more expensive to maintain. Total cost over 5 years including payments, insurance and maintenance is somewhere between $28,000 and $32,000. Same purpose. Get to work. Person B paid more than twice as much. And here is the part that really stings. Person B is paying $380 a month for that car. That is $380 a month that cannot go to savings. That cannot go to an emergency fund. That cannot go to investments. That $380 a month, if invested instead over 5 years at an average market return, would have grown to somewhere around $28,000. So the real cost of that car to person B is not $28,000 to $32,000. It is closer to $56,000 to $60,000 when you include the opportunity cost of what that money could have become. The poverty premium on a single car purchase is tens of thousands of dollars. This one is the most brutal of all. The American financial system charges you more to borrow money when you are least able to afford it. Think about that for a second. If you have excellent credit, a high income, and significant assets, you can borrow money at 3% or 4% interest. Maybe even less. If you have poor credit, a low income, and no assets, you borrow at 24% or 29% or sometimes higher. The person who needs the money the most pays the most to get it. The person who needs it the least pays almost nothing. This is not a coincidence. This is how the system is designed. The average American with credit card debt is paying somewhere between 20% and 28% annual interest right now. That means if you carry $5,000 in credit card debt at 24% interest, and you only make minimum payments, you will pay back not $5,000 but somewhere between $12,000 and $13,000 by the time it is paid off. And it will take you somewhere around 15 to 17 years. You borrowed $5,000. You paid back over $12,000. The bank made more than $7,000 from your financial struggle. And while you are paying that over those years, someone with good credit and assets is borrowing that same $5,000 at 4% and paying back $5,500 total. Same amount borrowed. One person pays $500 extra. The other pays over $7,000 extra. The poverty premium on debt alone is staggering. Here is another one that most people never calculate properly. Two people need a place to live. Person A has $60,000 saved for a down payment. They buy a house at $350,000 with a 30-year mortgage at 6.5% interest. Their monthly payment is around $1,830. Over 30 years they pay a significant amount in total, but they own a home that has likely appreciated in value, and that they own completely. Person B has no savings. They rent an apartment for $1,400 a month. Over 30 years person B has paid over $500,000 in rent. They own nothing. They have no equity. If they have to move, they start over completely. But here is the real killer. Renting versus buying is complicated, and there are situations where renting makes more sense. The real poverty premium in housing is not just about owning versus renting. It is about where you have to rent. People with less money often cannot afford to live in neighborhoods with good schools, lower crime rates, better job access, and more economic opportunity. So they pay the same or more in rent but live in areas that limit their ability to earn more, build networks, access better opportunities, and grow. The neighborhood you can afford shapes your access to everything else. Jobs. Schools for your kids. Safety. Community. Network. The poverty premium in housing is not just financial. It is generational. This one is personal for a lot of people, and it does not get talked about enough. Being poor is expensive for your health in ways that compound over decades. When you do not have money, you skip preventive care. You do not get the annual checkup. You do not fill the prescription because it costs too much this month. You do not go to the dentist until there is a crisis. And then the crisis costs 10 times what prevention would have cost. A teeth cleaning costs around $150. A root canal and crown because you skip those cleanings costs $3,000 to $5,000. A cholesterol screening costs $50. Heart disease treatment costs hundreds of thousands. The math is brutal. Preventive care is almost always dramatically cheaper than treating the problem once it becomes serious. But preventive care requires money up front. And when you do not have money up front, you skip it. And then you pay the much higher price later. When you can afford it, even less. There is also the indirect health cost. Financial stress is one of the leading causes of chronic health problems in America. High blood pressure, sleep disorders, anxiety, depression. These are not just mental health issues, They are physical health issues with long-term costs. People in chronic financial stress visit the emergency room more. They miss more work. They have shorter life expectancies on average. The poverty premium on health is not just money. It is years of your life. Here is the part that actually explains the gap between wealthy people and everyone else. Wealthy people have figured out how to systematically avoid almost every version of the poverty premium. They buy in bulk because they have cash available. They pay cash for cars or borrow at extremely low rates because their credit is excellent. They own rather than rent wherever it makes financial sense. They get preventive healthcare because they can afford it, and because they understand the long-term math. They borrow money at low rates when they need to because their financial position gives them options. And the compounding effect of avoiding the poverty premium over 20 or 30 years is enormous. Every time a wealthy person avoids paying the poverty premium, that money either stays in their pocket or goes to work building more wealth. It is not a small difference. It is the difference between a financial life that grows and one that constantly treads water. But here is the thing that most people miss. Rich people did not avoid the poverty premium because they were born rich. Many of them spent years in financial struggle paying every version of this premium. What changed is that they reached a threshold. A point where they had just enough financial cushion to start accessing the better deals. The lower rates. The bulk prices. The options that actually cost less. And once they crossed that threshold, the momentum shifted. This is the most important part of everything we have talked about today. There is a threshold. A financial tipping point. Where the poverty premium starts to disappear and the wealth premium starts to take its place. It is not a huge number. For most people it is somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000 in liquid savings combined with a credit score above 680 to 700. At that level you start accessing meaningfully lower interest rates. You have enough buffer to buy in bulk. You can handle a car repair without putting it on a credit card at 24% interest. You can start building credit history that opens better financial doors. The gap between paying the poverty premium and not paying it is not as wide as most people think. But crossing it requires deliberate intention because the poverty premium itself makes it harder to cross. You are trying to save money while the system is charging you more for everything. It is like trying to run uphill while someone is pushing you back. It is not impossible. People do it every day. But you need to understand exactly what you are working against. 3 specific things. Not a long list. 3 things that directly attack the poverty premium. The first is attack your interest rates before anything else. If you have high interest debt, this is the single highest return financial move you can make. Paying off a credit card at 24% interest is the equivalent of earning a guaranteed 24% return on that money. Nothing in the market gives you that consistently. Pay off the highest interest debt first. Aggressively. Before investing. Before saving beyond a basic emergency fund, because the poverty premium on debt is so high that eliminating it is almost always the best financial return available to you. The second is build your credit score deliberately. Your credit score determines what interest rate you pay on almost everything. A difference of 100 points in your credit score can mean paying 10% more or less in interest on major purchases over your lifetime. That is tens of thousands of dollars. Pay every bill on time. Keep your credit card balances below 30% of your limit. Do not open multiple new accounts at once. These 3 things alone, done consistently, will move your score significantly within a year. The third is build your buffer before you invest. Most financial advice tells you to invest first. But if you are currently paying the poverty premium, getting to that $10,000 to $15,000 buffer is more important than starting to invest immediately. Because that buffer is what lets you stop paying the premium. And stopping the premium frees up more money for investing than the early investment returns would have generated anyway. Get the buffer first. Then invest aggressively. The poverty premium is real. The system charges you more when you have less. That is not your fault. That is not a reflection of your intelligence, or your work ethic, or your character. But it is your reality. And now you understand it. And understanding it changes everything. Because once you see the poverty premium clearly, you can start making decisions that directly attack it instead of unknowingly feeding it. The goal is not to become rich overnight. The goal is to cross the threshold. To get to the point where the premium stops working against you and starts working for you. That is closer than you think. And now you know exactly what you are working toward. If you want to understand how saving your first $10,000 changes the math completely, and why that number is the exact threshold we talked about today, that video is right here. Watch that next. Everything we talked about today leads directly into that.